Fitchburg's first European settlers arrived over 300 years ago. Getting from place to place was a challenge for these people. The river, subject to floods, easily destroyed their simple bridges. People walked, used horses or carts and carriages to get where they needed to go. Mail roads led through the town from exotic locales like Boston. The road in the northwest corner, now Ashburnham Hill Road, led to Dorchester, Canada in the late 1700s. Strangely, this was right next door. Ashburnham was founded with land granted to soldiers from Dorchester in 1735 who fought in Canada in 1690. They received the isolated land in lieu of payment decades after their service. This grant and several smaller grants later became Ashburnham. Mail roads, dirt carriage roads, allowed mail and passenger stagecoaches to get through. Inns like the Upton Tavern in Dean Hill serviced travelers. Freight was a different story. The heavy carts, often drawn by oxen, destroyed roads. In 1799, the 5th Mass Turnpike Company was incorporated. Travelers were charged by their vehicle to use the toll road. Bits of this road remain in the southern part of the city. Ox and carts had only a brief moment in the sun in New England. In 1845, the railroad arrived in town. The mill owners needed a way to transport raw materials and finished products cheaply and reliably. In hilly central New England, water transportation was not an option. Laying tracks was backbreaking work. Laborers, most of them immigrants straight off the boat, built papermaker Alva Crocker's railroad, the Fitchburg Railroad, between Cambridge and Fitchburg. In many ways, the work crew was a self-contained unit. As the work moved westward, the workers' shanties were transported by rail to the next work area. When the workers arrived in Fitchburg, the shacks were set up near Sawyer Passway, close by the work area. The Irish workers moved to more permanent housing in the Water Street area, and Crocker donated the wood from the dwellings to be used to build the first Catholic church. One shanty escaped this fate, though. It is still in use today as an addition to a home on Forest Street. The railroad was essential for Fitchburg business, but even with the completion of the Fitchburg line, Crocker saw a way to improve his profits. He wanted to ship his goods west for the opening markets outside New England. The existing southern Massachusetts route charged too much for his thrifty blood. So he decided to build another line. Only one thing stood in the way, the Hoosick Mountains. So they built a tunnel. It was a 25-year project. Fundraising was only a small part of the problem. You see, no one had ever dug a tunnel of this length through this type of land. Once more, Crocker was recruiting off the boat. 192 people lost their lives drilling and blasting through the rock to complete the $20 million project. The final tunnel was 4 3/4 miles long. The first attempts to use new mechanized drilling methods were a disaster. One borer became stuck the first day and never moved again. It took the genius of another Fitchburger, Charles Burleigh, to design and manufacture the drills needed to bore the tunnel. His drill was run off compressed air. It was transported by a rail car and could drill quickly and deeply into the rock face, so the miners could place the nitroglycerin charges. This model of a tripod drill, at least 110 years old, was made by machinist Edward Newitt, who became a shop foreman at Putnam Machines. The drill was placed by a man standing on the platform and turning the handle. The compressed air came from dedicated buildings at either end of the tunnel. The drill was not particularly robust, but its frequent breakdowns were easily repaired. Despite the new iron horses, it wasn't over for real horse transportation yet. In 1886, the Fitchburg Street Railway put horse-drawn carriages on the local roads. The first single-track trolley arrived in West Fitchburg the same year. Electric trolleys weren't far behind. It was a machine age. Ivor Johnson began manufacturing bicycles in Fitchburg in 1891. By this time, there were 30 cars and 70 conductors and motormen working for the street railway. Whalum Park in Lunenburg was built by the street railway and was a popular destination for decades. Trolley cars came up Summer Street and turned left over a private road to get to the park. The open cars were dangerous. An accident on the F&L line in 1904 injured 11 people and was reported by the New York Times. In the days before radio, neither conductor knew another car was in the way. Even the railroad was dangerous. Workers were pinched or lost digits and limbs. A freight train wreck in West Fitchburg claimed 3 lives in 1905. The cause of the accident was similar. A train was stopped on the tracks, and the engineers in the oncoming train were not aware of its presence. Trolleys gave way to trackless trolleys, and automobiles began to appear. Jerry Martell is an auto appraiser and enthusiast.
Europe was ahead of us. We didn't really get into automobiles in the States till after 1900. One of the first builders of automobiles was Henry Ford. He built expensive cars at the beginning, but he realized that it wasn't for him, and he went bankrupt the first time, and he finally he had an original Model A in, I can't tell you the exact date, maybe 1907 or 8. Then he moved to the Model N and so forth. Then the Model T. The Model T was a vehicle that put the world, not just the United States, but the world on wheels. So the first cars were $500 or $600. By 1912 or 13, he sold a Model T for $250. Now, the old joke is, any color you want as long as it's black, for one reason. DuPont, which was making the paint, couldn't make the paint, the black dried fast enough, the other colors didn't dry fast enough. So that's the reason it was black.
Not everyone had a car or two, though.
Again, the industrialist, like anything else, the wealthy person, do it. Rodney Wallace, the original Wallace, George Wallace Jr.'s of Fitchburg paper, his father bought one of the first cars, as did the Crockers and the Burbanks. Those are the people that had automobiles before the rank and file. And they had expensive cars, maybe a Lincoln, Cadillac. You know, Chevrolet didn't come in until about 1914 to compete with Ford. And Buick was involved. Nobody even thought of a European car in those days. This was American cars for American people.
The gasoline engine was not a given. The West Fitchburg paper mills used a fleet of electric trucks loaded with batteries for local hauling.
George Wallace had a Detroit Electric, and there was an interesting car, tall, it had like a big beehive. You could sit in it, but the joke was you lifted the floorboard, there might have been 15 batteries. And that was a problem. Even today it's still a problem, how to make a small compact battery that gives you mileage. The new Chevrolet Volt, you know, that goes about 35 miles on a charge. So it's a combination motor and the electric.
Not everyone preferred automobiles. Ivor Johnson manufactured motorcycles in town from 1907 to 1915. Gamaches sold Harley-Davidsons. One more mode of transportation remained for Fitchburg to embrace: air travel. In 1924, a group of industrialists purchased land for the Fitchburg-Leominster Airport. The first flight was in 1929. Over the course of the next 50 years, the airport changed local features. The river and Crawford Street were rerouted to accommodate runways. A house was moved across the river so the owner could sleep in the airport. Even the city boundaries changed when Fitchburg swapped the No-Town Reservoir land for the land the airport occupies. Travel by road was becoming more common. Route 2 was in use by 1940, deflecting through travelers out of the center of town and providing a flexible way to haul freight. The railroad remained central to people's lives for quite some time. The Freedom Train stopped in Fitchburg in 1947 as part of its national tour. Clayton Whitney worked for the Freight Railroad from 1951 to 1989. His job was to organize the local trains so cars could be dropped off or picked up at each business.
Most of the cars that we received in Fitchburg came from the West. You know, like for the paper mills, you'd have carloads of pulp and stuff, and they'd be marked what mills they're going to go to. And you're making up a local train to go deliver those cars the next day. All right, they were put on in order. Consignee was the people that you served, you know. Right at this building, there's a spur that, unless they'd taken it out, there was a spur that come to a platform downstairs here when it was the coating company.
Some of the companies took care of their own cars once they were delivered.
We used to shop at Brockelman's Market on Upper Main Street. Of course, it's gone now, but you could park down behind the market in that's all changed in there. But you could park down there. When I was a little kid, you'd sit in the car. You don't want to go in a grocery store, but every once in a while you'd see them. They had these little electric. They were electric engines, and they'd move the cars around. The engine wasn't that tiny, you know. It was like probably a 20 or 30 foot long engine, you know, but it was electric. Funny looking little thing, you know, and a guy sat up in it. The co-op farmers, just before it closed, you know, what we used to call the West Yard, that they used to do an awful lot of business. They had their own little yard up there, 5 tracks up there, and there used to be a switching crew that was up there all day, basically all day long. In the end, they got a little small diesel engine. We didn't go up there anymore with a switcher. You just put the cars in from the top end and you took the empties out. They did all their switching.
In 1951, when Clayton began work, there were still lots of passenger and freight trains going through Fitchburg. Steam and electric locomotives had to be turned around to go back up the tracks.
The one in Fitchburg, the one that when we worked there, which has all been filled in, it's gone now, that was electric. The same as like the ones they have down in Boston and up in East Deerfield. Those the electric motors on them. Some of the outlying points like Greenville, New Hampshire, I know, because we used one. That was a turntable that could be turned by hand with 2 people turning it. Like, that's hard to believe. This big locomotive would be parked right in the middle of it, and it was balanced so good that a man would be pushing on a pipe out here and a pipe, and it would turn a locomotive like that. The one in Fitchburg had 2 big electric motors in it, one on each end. There was 13 stalls down there. I may be wrong, and somebody will pick me up on it, I don't know, but I think there was 13. One of the motors let go, and when the powers to be sent it out to be fixed, it never came back. So now it limped around on one motor, and then now it's all filled in.
Things have changed. Thousands of cars travel Fitchburg roads every day. Passenger train service is limited to the Boston run. The mills serviced by the railroads are mostly closed, and the airport caters to business travelers and local enthusiasts. Things are changing in the car industry, too.
I was in Boston this week, and I saw the buses. There was even a pedicab, kind of cute. The young fellow, it's a bicycle, 3 wheels, and short runs in downtown Boston. There's no gas there. This is pedal power. I've driven a Prius, and as I said, years ago, I drove the Detroit Electric and a Prius. Prius is kind of fun when you see the little gauge in the center and you press the button. I guess because there's no sound, it kind of is dull to me. I like a little boom, boom, a little shifting through the gears, you know. I like a little attitude.
Still, a drive down a favorite road will probably always be the thing to do.
Ringe Road. Why do I say Ringe Road, Upper Ringe Road? I've bought and sold maybe 30, 40, 50 cars. That's my street because you can accelerate. It's got some curves. It's got character to the road. I used to say, that's a Ferrari road. So that's my special rider around here. This is in backyard Fitchburg, right off of John Fisk Ringe Road up to Ashby. That 10 miles or 8 miles, that's my racetrack, or my selling track.
Good evening, and welcome to the 8th episode of Fitchburg History. Tonight, obviously, is transportation. And we are lucky to have State Senator Jen Flanagan here with us, who, among her other positions, is Vice Chair of the Joint Committee on Transportation. Thank you for being here tonight, Jen.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, my pleasure. Maybe we could talk about some of the biggest challenges Fitchburg is facing transportation-wise right now.
There's a lot of issues that Fitchburg faces. I think first and foremost in people's minds is access to Route 2. It's very difficult to get to Route 2 from the city. And some people feel as though that limits the amount of businesses that can come in. But as you just saw in your video, business has been thriving in the past, and it can thrive in the future. And I think there's been a lot of work done to bring businesses back to Fitchburg. It may not be the same mill town we knew back then, but we're bringing in more industries and more people that are trying to make different products, and train is a big part of that. So our transportation system is huge.
Okay. Fitchburg is a gateway community. What does that mean?
Fitchburg, as a gateway community, Fitchburg has sort of an esteemed role because it really provides an opportunity for the state to recognize the benefits that Fitchburg has among some of the other cities in the state of Massachusetts. And as a gateway city, we can work with historic credits to look at the different buildings that we have. We've been looking at transportation. We've been looking at just different ways that we can get people to invest in Fitchburg and that we can get them to thrive here because it is such a it's a golden gem. I mean, a lot of people don't think about it that way given the times of the year or what's going on, but we think that it's a really important part of North Central Massachusetts, and we've tried to work as hard as we can to improve it.
What special things does Fitchburg offer that once the transportation is a little better will be valuable?
I think one of them is a workforce. I mean, we have a very strong workforce here in Fitchburg. People are being trained to work not only in manufacturing companies, because we've had a lot of manufacturing up here, but in sort of the biotech industries. Mount Wachusett Community College has a great reputation for working with students, not only there, but in the healthcare industry. We've been working alongside the rest of my legislative delegation for the transportation, not just the train, but the roads and bridges, to get these bridges up to par and to get the roads open so people can move amongst the north central part of the region. And I think really the location. We certainly have lots of land, and not many places have that in Massachusetts. We're able to have businesses expand. They're able to physically expand their plants or their structures, and sometimes we've often had them move from place to place because they've just outgrown their space. So those are good problems to have.
Those are very good problems to have. Yeah, I was definitely surprised to learn that Fitchburg, 70% of it is open land right now.
It is.
Which is a huge amount, really,
It
for
is.
such a dense urban area.
A lot of people think of Fitchburg as just an urban area, but I think there's so much more to it when you really start to look at the history of it and you start to look at what we've had here and what we can have again. The state puts a lot of emphasis on protecting open space, but at the same time, we also know that with energy, the wind turbines up in Gardner, and certainly other places are considering it. That's just another way that we can try to help businesses and to help us grow here in Fitchburg. So it really does thrive. I mean, it has its issues, but it thrives.
Over the last 50 or 60 years, a lot of things have happened in this town to make it, or city, this is a city, to make it less wonderful. Our industrial base has sort of dissolved. Route 2 basically bypasses us, so it's difficult to get in and out of places. Certainly we're not getting the number of trains, passenger or freight, that used to come through the area. And it's really a pretty poverty-stricken city, which was once a thriving place. How will these changes, the transportation actually change to help benefit this community again?
Well, I think, certainly over the last 50 years, everywhere has changed, not just Fitchburg. Industry has come and gone, but industry itself has also changed. We're not talking about our grandfathers' manufacturing companies where you're standing at the machine and you're pressing one button or you're moving the lever up and down. We're talking about businesses that are actually producing medical devices. They're producing different commercial products that are very small pieces of a bigger package. And we have now the technology in our companies that may not require as many people, but it requires a lot of brain power. We have a lot of research and development. You've also got Fitchburg State University, which has finally come downtown Fitchburg, and that's been a long time coming. So you have an influx of talent, of academic talent, and that turns into jobs. You have one of the most important universities in this area is Fitchburg State. And that compares to Worcester. I mean, that compares to very close 20 minutes from here. And I think those gems is what we try to build upon, is try to say, we may have some empty buildings, there may be, poverty-stricken areas, but the Elm Street corridor, the groups are trying to improve. People are working at improving their lives here in Fitchburg, and I think it's really it's really a positive aspect to think of how many people and how many groups are working towards that. The regional transportation system we have, the busing system, it gets you between Leominster, Fitchburg, and Gardner. You can move around, get to Burbank Hospital or get to Leominster, and if you need to see your doctors or if you need to, to take care of your family. And really with the train, it gets you in and out of Boston. You can go to Boston for the day, see the culture, go shopping, go to dinner, come home. And I say I have the best of both worlds. I work in the city, but I live out here. I have a huge backyard, but I get to have city life all day. And it's great to come home to a place out here that has lots of land. So we have a lot of gems here.
We do.
We do.
We do. A big change that's coming here is going to be the Wachusett station.
Yes.
And changes to the tracks and the lines. Can you tell us a little bit about all that?
Yes, this is actually 15 years in the making, and I can tell you that we've got notes in my office that are 15 years old from when we started this conversation when I was a legislative staffer. And so the goal is, and always has been, 1 hour from Fitchburg to Porter Square. And I say Porter Square because once you go inside Porter Square, it really is difficult to switch anything because a lot of the trains come out of North Station. And Porter is your first intake into the subway system. So the goal is going to be an hour. With that, we've changed a lot of the grade crossings. We have changed the lines on the track, and they're still being upgraded. We're also double tracking from Air to South Acton, and that allows the trains to essentially come off the passageway, wait, allow whether it's freight or commuter rail, them to go through, and that way you can utilize your tracks better, and you can have more frequent service. And then we're also looking to expand up to Wachusett because the businesses, so we'll be able to move more raw materials. We'll be able to have that freight that goes through with Pan America. And then also we want to increase the reliability. There's nothing worse than knowing your train is coming in late or that you're going to be late for work, because we don't have jobs where we can be late for work every day. So we're trying to increase the reliability on the tracks.
How is all this getting funded?
From every which direction you can imagine. There's ARA funding, there's federal funding, there's state funding.
What's ARA funding?
That is the stimulus money.
Okay.
That was the American Reinvestment Recoveries Act. So that money has been allocated. The state had a $75 million piece of this. The feds had a $75 million piece of this. And then the Wachusett station is another $55 million federal program. So the state and the federal government are partnering together. And it's really been a legislative delegation. And it's been the pushing and advocating and constantly going at, the MBTA, which is now the DOT, or going at the Federal Highway Administration to really talk about the funding piece of it. There used to be a time when the Secretary of Transportation and the MBTA chairman didn't want to look at me because they knew exactly what I was going to say. It's all about the Fitchburg line. And they used to joke, we know, you have the Fitchburg line. But I think it's important that we keep it on the forefront because we have, in the state of Massachusetts, to deal with the Silver Line out in Boston. We have to deal with the big dig problems that are going on, those road and bridges that we're dealing with the bridge program. So we really have to be, sort of rambunctious and loud to keep our voices heard.
Well, good. You've also mentioned before some specific differences with the Fitchburg line than from other commuter lines.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have the longest, I think it's 45.7 miles, the longest track, and we have the oldest track, and we have one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive, train fare because of the length of the tracks and how far it takes. So those are really some of the unique parts of the Fitchburg line that we've had, is that we've been here forever, and that's what we keep telling people. And you proved it during your first segment, is that this train has been running for decades and generations, and that we wanted to continue to do that.
Since 1845.
Absolutely.
It's a big, long time.
And to think that was difficult for them back then, and now what we're talking about is grade crossings and fiber optics, and we're talking about Wi-Fi and all kinds of things. So.
Well, yeah, and it's amazing how much safer the train has become. Listening to Clayton before when I talked to him, and the things they used to do for signaling to tell. I mean, they had no radios.
Well, and one of the big projects that we're doing as part of the transportation plan is in-cab signalization, so that you can tell who's coming and going and who's on the line. I couldn't imagine back then, and especially I wonder at the speeds that they went at.
But if you've got a heavy freight train, that thing's not stopping.
Oh no. You need some room. You need some lag time.
Yeah, and it wasn't always there.
as we saw.
Yeah. Now, there must be some benefit that we get because of Devon's being there now in some of this track improvement.
Well, I mean, there's a benefit that, you know, more people are out here, but we would like ultimately to have reverse commute where we're bringing people from the eastern part of the state out here to work and providing jobs. And we all know that when Devon's closed, there were supposed to be companies internationally that were coming here, and the people that lived in the service area were supposed to get the jobs. And not many of those companies have come to Devon's, quite frankly. You know, we have a lot of people that are there. Mount Wachusett has done a fabulous job with their classrooms and their labs there. Bristol Myers Squibb has come there. We've also still have part of the Army there, but it's really, we're hoping that we can use the reverse commute and get some more industry out here and get some more people working.
That would be exciting.
It would.
Yes, very, very good. You said that there's a new Secretary of Transportation.
There
How will
is.
that be affecting us?
Well, the good thing is Secretary Davey will not need to be brought up to speed on the train project because as the head of the MBTA, he and I have worked extensively on the train issues. So it's good to finally have someone that's been there and sees it and knows what's going on. He actually called me Friday to say that he's excited to work in his expanded role with us out here in North Central Massachusetts.
Excellent.
So it'll be good.
Yeah. So
I'm excited.
Yeah, good. You should be.
He doesn't need to know where Route 2 is. He already does. He's already been here. So.
Oh, does he hear about Route 2?
He does.
Yes.
Every time I'm on it.
Every time you're on it. So that's not always a positive experience for you. No. Okay, we're winding up to the end of our show, so I thank you very much
Oh, my pleasure.
for being here. And I'd like to also thank all the staff and volunteer here at FATV. Everybody really comes together to put this, and it's a lot of work.
It is.
It really is. The transportation article will be in the Sentinel this Sunday, August 8th. And while the credits roll, Paul Luria and I will be playing an Irish American song that I call Filimi Ori Orie, or Working on the Railroads, while the credits roll. Filimi Ori Orie, Filimi Ori Orie, Filimi Ori Orie, when I work on the railway. In 1841, I put my corduroy breeches on, I put my corduroy breeches on to work upon the railway. Filimi Ori Orie, Filimi Ori Orie, Filimi Ori Orie, when I work on the railway. In 1842, I left the old Fort, I left the old Fort to work upon the railway. Filimi Ori Orie, Filimi Ori Orie, when I worked on the railway. In 1843, 'twas then I met sweet Biddy McGee, an elegant wife she's been to me when working on the railway. Filimi Ori Orie, Filimi Ori Orie, Filimi Ori Orie, I work on the railway. In 1844, I worked again and I worked some more at Bangor back the Boston Roar when working on the railway. Filimi Ori Orie, Filimi Ori Orie, Filimi Ori Orie, when I worked on the railway. In 1845, then I felt more dead than alive, 'cause then I felt more dead than alive